Breishis Chapter 19. So in this chapter, we have the continuation of the previous story, and it's kind of weird to figure out how it actually continues, but I will give a story of it. We have the men or malachim, which they are called suddenly, angels, or messengers, or ambassadors, as I think should be a good translation, which have been visiting Avraham, and Avraham has been talking with Hashem about it, and we've heard Hashem saying, I will go down and see if the complaint I've received about Sodom is correct. Have they done what I've heard complained about them? And the next thing is we hear that two malachim are coming to Sodom in the evening. So what I understand is that this is the continuation of Hashem or his messenger or whatever it is going down to Sodom to see what's going on. And what we will get here in this chapter specifically is, one can say, three main parts of the story in this chapter. The first is the story of the malachim coming to Lot's house. He invites them in, and the story of the people of Sodom wanting to rape them. It doesn't explicitly say that, but that's what we understand. And Lot trying to offer his daughter, and then the people becoming hit with blindness and not able to do it. That's the second part. And the third part is how Sodom gets destroyed, and while it gets destroyed, Lot gets saved by these people. And then there's many other things until we get all the way to the end of the chapter, which is the story of the two daughters of Lot and how they had their children with him. What I want to propose is that this story of how the people of Sodom behaved is not here just like to be something that randomly happened, and that happens to be that night when they came to destroy Sodom, this happened to them. What the story is meant to be is actually a display of the kind of behavior that Sodom had, which has caused them to be destroyed. Or another way of saying it would be to say that this judgment, there was like a case brought for the court, and maybe these malachim are sort of like the court deciding their case, and they get judged to see if what has been told about them, that they are right, they're evil and sinning, is it true? And we actually are shown that it's true. So whether you read it as like this, or whether you read it as the story displaying to us the kind of evil that's them, this is what this part is doing in the story. So it's very clear display of what actually it is that's so bad about Sodom. So what we have, and it's interesting that this continues the chronology from the times that we had before. So Avram was sitting in his tent, which we should take to be something like noon, when the day is the hottest. And that's when the whole story happened before. Now, as the sun sets in the evening, these two malachim come to Sodom, and Lot is sitting b'shar Sodom and at the gate of Sodom. And we see many other places. This is a place where people used to sit around. Of course, there's also later, and especially in Sefer Durham, there's the implication that the gate, is also the place where the court sits. It's not necessarily, I don't think the pshat that Lot is being part of the court, but it is like where he sees them coming in, and he stands up, just very similar to Avram, who stood up and bowed to them. He's the same as the thanking, stands up for them and bows to them and invites them into their house. And with almost the same kind of language, the big exception being that Avram had them sit outside, and also probably because it was in the noon, so it's hot, so it's nicer to sit outside. And maybe also because wherever Avram lives, it's okay to have guests, but Lot needs to hide his guests in his house, as we will see. But he gives them the same invitation: come to my house. You will sleep there overnight, and then you will move on your way in the morning. Now what we have is different, is that they refuse. Now, refusing to be invited to someone's house can be also like an accepted way of manners. Like, you don't always accept an invitation immediately. It's actually interesting that they accepted the invitation of Avram immediately. And also seems to be showing here that there's something not simple with this invitation. It's not something that actually always happened. There's some complication here. So they say, no, we'll sleep in the street. And then it passed. Apparently that was like the accepted alternative. Like, if you're a traveler, you don't have where to sleep, so it's fine, you can sleep in the street. But Lot begs them, he begs them very much, and they come to them, and he brings them to his house. Vayasle mishte, makes for them a party. I think the word mishte should generally be translated as a party, literally a drinking time, and he bakes for them matzahs and they eat. And this is also meant to show, again, I think matzahs is meant to show that he wasn't ready for this, so this was not like a planned thing. He saw a guest and he invited them into his house. But also, since it's the evening, it's maybe more the time of having a mishta, and other than when they were by Avram, where they just had lunch, so to speak. Okay, so now we have the next scene, which is also we're working with the time before they're going to sleep. So it's night, but it's not yet. They haven't yet slept. They haven't yet laid down to sleep. And the people of the city, meaning the people of Sodom, are all surrounding this house. All of them. In Nar Vazuk, from the young to the old, entire city. This is very clearly meant to show us how what Hashem told to Avram. There isn't even 10 tzaddikim in the city. All of them are around with this demand. They all call out and they say, "We are these people that came to you. Bring them out to us, and we will know them," which implies we will rape them. And Lot goes out to them, closes the door, and makes them an offer. And we can see from this offer that Lot, being the so-called tzaddik in Sodom, isn't a very major tzaddik either, or at least he's very compromised by the need to deal with these kinds of people and these kinds of demands. Obviously, this was a demand that sort of made sense to them, or at least it's the kind of place where this kind of demand makes sense, and this kind of response makes sense. Like it says, "Oh, my brothers, don't do something so bad, like to rape a male, that would be very bad. So I have 2 daughters, I have not known a man yet, so there's you would say they're single, but really means to say they're virgins. They're sort of available. They're not taken yet. I'll bring them out to you. You do to them what you like. Just don't bother these people. They're my guests." And this seems to be also something of a perversion of the ethics of hospitality. So Avram is said in the previous story, in the beginning of the story, really, to be this person that teaches hospitality, and I don't know if he teaches it, but he has this hospitality. Now, we know that part of hospitality traditionally is the protection of the guests that come to you. You have to protect them. And that's really what hospitality is about, right? Someone is out on the street and they're exposed to the elements, they're exposed to whatever lawlessness goes on to people that are not in their city. They don't have this covenant. It's like a protection of belonging to a group of people, or you're a stranger, so you're literally not under a law, and that taking someone as a guest means, especially if they can sleep by your house, means bringing them under your protection. But of course, bringing them under your protection in the sense of therefore offering your daughter instead of them, that's already something seems to be somewhat weird. And of course, we see later the story of Lot's daughters continues to be weirder and weirder. So although he learned from Avram this ideal of hospitality, the ideal of taking care of your family, it seems to have been somewhat maybe too extreme, or maybe perverted in some way. So these people from Sodom, they say Geshala, and we've seen before that this language of Gisha sometimes means something like, okay, let's have a judgment. Let's see what you're saying. And then they say, so now you're a judge. You just come here. You're a stranger too, basically. So, and now you're telling us what our customs should be. And it's weird because he didn't tell them anything about what the judgment should be. The only thing he told them was al na'achat, don't do something bad. And it seemed to be enough of a judgment, and they were very against judging in Sodom. So, especially against strangers telling them what to do. And they said, you know what, we'll do to you worse than what we would have done to them. And they approached the door so to break it. And then we have the beginning of like a miraculous thing. These people stretch their hand outside. They bring light back inside. They close the door. This is interesting. It has a resonance with Hashem closing the door for Noach and the Mabul. And there's some resonance in general, of course, with the light being saved from Sodom, just like Noach was saved from the Mabul. That was water. This is fire. But there's some resonance in that. And what happens is the people around become hit with blindness, and they're afflicted with blindness also from Mikotan Vad Godel, from the smallest to the biggest, and they can't find the door. So this is the way they were saved. Lot was saved from the mob around his house by them becoming blind, which is an interesting image for if you can think about what it means. So now that we have very clearly what kind of people Sodom is, so we understand that they will be destroyed. So now these Anushim tell Lot, they tell this to Lot, right? And they start off by saying, tell us who else is with you here. Who is your family, your son-in-laws, your children, your daughters, anything you have. Let's take them out because we will be destroying the place, because their complaint has come to the face of Hashem. God has sent us to destroy her. So now Lot, another interesting thing, Lot tries. He goes to his son-in-laws, the people who married his daughters, and he tells them to leave the city. And now, as is the fate of most prophets, this decreeing doom on cities, he's laughed at. And of course he's laughed at, because why not? It's really even funny, like, why you expect something else to happen. And now we're continuing. Remember, this story has very clear timelines, and we're continuing. It becomes the morning, as the sun is coming up, and these messengers, these malachim, start pushing Lot. They start telling him, you have to wake up, you have to come, take your wife, take your 2 daughters who are here, so your other daughters who are already married, right? We see these are the 2 daughters that are still at his house. These other daughters that are already married, who had husbands who we tried to talk, they're going to be lost, basically. You have to come, because otherwise you will be destroyed along with the sin of the city. In other words, your only way here to be saved is to be out. It's not like we learned before. Avram can't save the city. It's not enough. We don't have 10 tzaddikim in the city to save the whole city. We're going to take you out, but that's all. And he is still taking his time for his mama. So therefore the men, and now it says Vayir ha'anushim. Suddenly they're not malachim, they're anushim. Another thing to think about. Grab him and take him out. And they put him outside. Now we have another very interesting scene, which is the story of Lot's wife. Each of these has another message, which we should think about what it is. I think that the general story of Lot's wife is saying has something to do with this Lot being very reluctant to leave. And Lot's wife, we might assume, maybe is actually a local from Sodom. Maybe that's really why he went to Sodom. He found a wife there. We don't really know who his wife was. And she seems to have had a harder time to separate herself, to move on from Sodom. And he got an explicit warning about this, right? They take him out and they tell them, run away, don't look back, don't stand anywhere in this entire area, the entire plain. Run to the mountain, otherwise you will die. You will die along with them. And now, Lot is actually himself also scared of doing this. In other words, he says, I don't really want to go all the way to the mountain. Why does he think that the mountain would be less safe than staying somewhere closer? It's kind of counterintuitive. He should have said, I will run as far as I can. But it seems like, again, he feels like he's safe here. He has some protection. He knows the people around here or something like that. And he will go very far somewhere. And another thing, which is maybe implied, but it doesn't say here, is remember that he split from Avram, and Avram took the other side. And maybe he's understanding like he can't go back there, because then he's back into the trouble with Avram. And so he makes a proposal. The first thing, makes a proposal, and then it's accepted. This is very, very interesting. There's like a prayer, you could even call it. And it's like it's phrased almost as a prayer. Al Adonai. Of course, this might be speaking to angels. Again, this language of Adonai, my Lord, which we had Avram speaking to the angels like that. We had Lot speaking to the angels like that, and the same in the beginning when they came to him. And he begs them, and he says, you've done great kindness to me, please add your kindness. This is another thing, very normal way of convincing people. You mention their previous kindness to you and ask for more. And he says there's this town here, there's this city here. Vihi mitzar, it is short or small or young. Halay mitzar, it's a small thing. Let me save my life there. So he sort of seems to be saying, this is a small town. It's not a big deal if you don't destroy it. Maybe it's not so evil because it's small, and there's less evil just because of the amount. It can be less. So, and they say, okay, I will give you that. I will literally raise your face, right? Which is a language of doing something beyond what is really the judgment, beyond what is really needed, and go there quickly because I need to wait for you to get there before I can destroy Saddam. So there's like this very explicit. There's something very rushed in this story. Like there's the whole story of Lot running from Saddam. has this urgency in it, where it's like he has to get out right away. On the other hand, the Malachim need him to get out, and they're pushing him also because they can't destroy Sodom before he's there. But there's a deadline. Everyone's on a deadline here. And as Hashem Yotza, the sun comes out 5 minutes ago, Shachar Ola, right? Something like what we call Aleis HaShachar, right? Literally Aleis HaShachar, which is like this first rays of light, the first inklings of light that we get in the end of the night and beginning of the morning, and then we have the sun actually coming out. And that's the next stage. And Loit comes to Tzayar, and Hashem makes rain on Sodom and Amorah, fire and gafris, which sulfur or something, from Hashem. I think this is an interesting language, like Hashem from Hashem. But what it's trying to say is that this is something that came from the heaven, similar to what we had with the Mabul, where the waters came from the heaven. Here we have these fires from the heaven. I'm not sure what this kind of, it must be referring to some kind of natural thing. I don't know what. And it destroys. Vayafach, literal language is it turns over. I don't think we should understand it literally to mean turn over, as if the heaven was on the floor, on the earth, and the earth was on the heaven. Although that might be implied, there might be a rhetorical language which just connects to this, which we also have to understand how it would work, what it would mean, probably related to the order of the vertical heaven and earth in Masa. But we have to think about that. But it destroys. This is just a word for destroys. Destroys these cities, the entire plain, all the people living there, all the plants. So it's interesting because in the Mabul there were no plants destroyed, or at least that not something explicitly said. It explicitly talks about the animals being destroyed. Here we have the plants destroyed. And his wife looks back and becomes a Netziv Melech, a something like a tower, not a tower, like a beam of salt. And this looking back, I think that literally shouldn't take it to mean like just from looking. It's something like she stayed back. It was harder for her to leave. Like I said, even Loit is having a hard time, and we have to imagine like this great calamity coming, and it's like chasing everyone, and she didn't make it. Basically, that's the Gafres V'esh, or something that seemed to turn things into salt or make them salty or something like that. So that's the end of Sodom. That's the end of Loit's wife also, along with Sodom. We have like a sort of coda to the story. We have Ram. It's not really clear what it's meant to say, but it's really like a coda to the part where Avram had this whole dialogue with God before about should Sodom be destroyed. And now we have Avram woke up in the morning. Again, this is the next morning. And he goes in the same place where he stood in the face of God. He stood and talked to him, and he sees somehow he's on the hill, and that's probably why I was saying earlier that we talk about Lot going to the mountain. It seems like Avram is on the hill, on the mountain, which is I think it depends where you exactly put this geographically, but something like more to the west of that. And he's on a mountain, and he can see what's going on, and he sees the smoke sort of, or the vapor rising up from this whole plain. So then, right, like the vapor, like the smoke coming out of a great fire. And we have like more of like a narrative note which says, and when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Avram, and he took Lot out of that, although he destroyed the cities. So that's the end of Sodom. And now we have one more story which doesn't really connect to anything. In other words, we don't see Avram in it, we don't see Hashem in it. What we do see is Lot, his two daughters, and the importance of this story is, of course, for a lot of stories in the rest of the Tanakh, which talk about these two nations which came out of Lot, which are Ammon and Moav. So we have the story of Lot actually, yes, moving from Tzayar. So we see that he's been very reluctant. It's very hard for him to move on. But he ends up moving on. He moves from Tzayar to the mountain. Har does literally mean something like the hill country, generally, and it's a geographical signifier here. And he moves because he's afraid of staying in Tzayar. Apparently, this whatever Gafres V'esh was seems to be something like spreading in some way, and he thinks it's going to get to him too. And he lives living in a cave together with his two daughters. Now, the older daughter tells the younger daughter, look, our father is old. There's no man anymore around to live with us, to Lowy, as is the way of the earth. So it's interesting, we have the way of the earth here, which is of course, derech eretz is language for everything, for the way things are, and this is one of the important places where it says. But it should be contrasted to what we discussed here about like the mapechas, the earth is not working in the way. And of course, hishes kolbos, that is dark eretz, is the language of the Mabul, where it's meant to imply, at least according to many readings, some kind of sexual sin, which is called here derech eretz also. So where they devised the plan. They still want to have children. Of course, there's also very many echoes and resonances here with the story of what happened with Loach and his children, Loach and his grandson Canaan, or his son Cham, after he left the Taiva. But something different happened, or not exactly the same thing. Let's make get our father drunk, and we will sleep with him, and then we will have children from him. So they seem to be under the impression that the whole world was destroyed, which is also like weird. Why would they have such an impression? Obviously, they escaped, but I think maybe they're the only ones that escaped. Not clear. And anyways, that's what they do. So they get their father drunk that night. The older one comes and sleeps with him, and he doesn't know anything about it. He's sort of blackout drunk. In the morning, the older one tells the younger one, look, this is what I did at night. How about you do it tonight? And we'll do the same thing. And she does the same thing. And they both get pregnant. And they have both children. The first one has a child, calls it Moav, and we're supposed to understand something like Moav, from my father. It's her father's son. And the younger one has another son called Ben Ami. Again, Ami means my family, so son of my family. And these are the children, the fathers or the ancestors of the two nations, Ammon, Moav and Ammon. Like until now, you know of the nations Moav and Ammon. These are descendants of this story. Okay, so this is a fascinating story. And I'm going to stop here, but you can think a lot of different resonances and meanings of it.